Thank you so much, Steffi. Ilka, you paying attention?
Yeah, and I feel like this is just for you.
All right, just for you. We're all focused on you. So great to be back at DLD in Munich. And Steffi, thank you so much for doing it in June rather than January. It feels quite wonderful to be here. Okay, yeah, it's May. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So great to be here with you. And I think there's no better place really to discuss sort of like autonomy and the future of mobility than here in Munich, with so many people working on it, both in industry, entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers. And I remember being here a few years ago, I can't remember when, about 7 years ago, and I met an executive for BMW who was telling me about the kind of like the way in which the company was rethinking itself in terms of moving from thinking of itself as an automotive manufacturer to being a mobility provider and working around an acronym, ACES, autonomous, connected, emission-free, and shared. And today we're going to get part of that acronym. We're going to get the autonomous part because we have one of the world's foremost thinkers and practitioners of autonomy here today. Qasar, nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We've been promised autonomous vehicles for so long, and it feels like it's been a long journey to get here. Can you just, I guess, first of all, just tell us a little bit about Applied Intuition and what you do, what the purpose is, what the mission is?
Yeah, I'll keep it very short because it's probably the least interesting part of the conversation. Applied is a software company based in the Bay Area, but offices around the globe, including Munich. We raised $350 million. Most of the autonomy projects around the world use us for their tooling. We build tools that engineers use to build algorithms. So any AI system, there's algorithms and there's tools. You tend to hear about algorithms. You tend to hear about Waymo and Cruise, BMW, Daimler. We build the tools that those algorithms are built on. When we started the company, the general view is the tools are almost as hard as the algorithms. Yeah. So why wouldn't you do the algorithms? It's just a better business right now. Over time, I think this will be a great business too. But yeah, we started about 5 years ago. Functioning business, which we're very super proud of, considering current market conditions. Yeah.
So I think that obviously with most sort of like technologies, we move from this kind of period of the infrastructure being built to like the application layer where things are built on top of it. And the most obvious kind of like Web 2.0 example is we had the infrastructure of the internet, and then suddenly the kind of like the gatekeepers that we now all kind of use their services were built on top. Is that fundamentally what you're doing? You're building that infrastructure piece so that other software companies can come and build on top?
Yeah, exactly. It's slightly different because these companies are AI companies, so it's slightly different than just traditional software. But a better example of this maybe is mobile. Yeah. People a lot of times think about mobile as this thing that the iPhone kind of did, but actually there's a lot of work that has to happen in advance. And if we talk about autonomy like we talk about mobile, well, when did mobile happen? Well, mobile didn't happen at any one point. Mobile happens over, first you have the Qualcomm bricks, you have the Razr Motorola phones, then you have an iPhone, which is very gimmicky initially, and then it has an app store, and then finally as a consumer you have WhatsApp, Instagram, Uber. These companies are all started within the same 12, 16-month period. And it's not random that these companies are started at the same time. Founders were trying to build companies, but that mobile ecosystem didn't exist, that infrastructure didn't exist. A lot of times people think infrastructure, they think about just having servers. That's not it. An app store's infrastructure, having phones that have enough battery life and have cameras on them. Once enough people have that, then actually building an Instagram is much easier, and that's why Instagram goes from 0 to something like 30 million users in the first 12 months, and 11 employees, sells for $1 billion, right? That doesn't happen without this kind of pre-revolution of chips and batteries and kind of devices. Autonomy, the same thing is happening. Sensors are getting cheaper. The way we do mapping and the way we look at maps is getting cheaper. The tools like us, the data labeling, there's an intense downward pricing pressure. And when this cost is distributed among a bunch of companies, when Waymo starts, they have to build all the tools that Applied builds just for themselves. Yeah. We build it for everybody. And therefore, we're subsidizing it for everybody. And therefore, the self-driving car is just cheaper and cheaper to make. To finish the mobile analogy, in Parse, which is a company that Facebook bought 2010 for like $80 million, was primarily just for mobile talent because there were so few mobile engineers. By 2015, not many years later, high school kids are making mobile apps. and it's not special to be a mobile engineer. Today, it's very special to be a roboticist and an autonomy engineer. In a very short time horizon, it's not going to be special. And that's a transition from infrastructure to applications. If you're trying to build a company, a very technical company, you have to understand those, those nuances and when that switch happens. I think the autonomy application layer is coming, and it's coming pretty quickly, but it's not there yet.
Okay, well, let's dig into that a little bit. We have been promising this for a long time. We're seeing level 2, level 3 autonomy. It's got to get to level 5 before vehicles can actually operate on their own. I know we're seeing experiments, and there are kind of like test rides going on in various cities across the world. Where do you think we are? When is this actually going to be deliverable?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a slightly nonsensical question, not your nonsensical question, the nonsensical question of like, when is autonomy going to be here? It's similar to say like, when's the internet here or when's mobile here? It doesn't come here.
Well, I guess
it's very incremental.
Well, I guess some people in technology are almost like walking back like what autonomous actually means, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's define autonomy, right? So there's these different layers. So autonomy exists right now in the sense of you can get in a Tesla as a consumer, and you can buy something that has some autonomous functions already. It exists if you go to San Francisco, and you can take, as a general public, you can take a ride in a car that has no human beings in it, and will take you all around San Francisco. Cruise is doing this. There's already two public deployments, Waymo and Cruise, of self-driving in San Francisco. So if you want autonomy, you can go to San Francisco right now and be in a car with no human beings, and it takes you around. It's just autonomy is not everywhere. It's not in Munich. It's not in, in India, but it will. And so when you say, when is autonomy going to be here? It's like the future is unevenly distributed, right? So it'll be everywhere. It just will get there in different time frames.
But is it just going to be in Phoenix on a sunny day on a
no, absolutely not.
Grid that's,
And there's no evidence that that's the case. Now, that's the right way to do it if you want to incrementally build the feature set. And you can think about autonomy as features. And weather, location, geography, geofencing, these are all features. And each of these companies are working on more and more features. So it's like saying, I got the first mobile app when the iPhone App Store comes and the mobile app isn't very good because it's just like some sounds. That's not the end of the App Store. There's going to be many, and so this similar thing will happen in autonomy. The type of autonomy that people don't talk about that already happens is off-road autonomy. Caterpillar's been doing autonomy for many, many years, decades. Autonomy exists in defense ecosystems already. So autonomy already exists. It just doesn't exist in the way that most people in conferences like this talk about, which is level 4 robo-taxis, ubiquitously available to the general public. That is still a while away.
Well, let's dig into what you just said. So where it actually exists, let's look at your kind of like the pie chart of your customers. Who is that? Who are you actually providing for?
Yeah, so it's the autonomy companies that you classically think of, the sexy robo-taxi companies that have raised billions of dollars. It's automotive companies, so of the 20 largest global manufacturers of vehicles, 17 of them are customers. So lots of automotive companies are working on autonomy. But when I mean lots, I mean 100% of automotive companies are working on autonomy. So there are customers, and then the construction, the mining, defense use cases. We just last week, our company put on a conference in Washington, D.C. for policymakers around autonomy and national security. So autonomy is in anything that moves. There's some autonomous components to it already. So we have customers that are doing autonomous baggage movement at airports, cleaning streets autonomously. So anything you see that can be small, like a sidewalk delivery robot with burritos, all the way to something very large, like a commercial truck, all of those things will be autonomous. And the way that each use case is kind of unfolding is different. It's actually easier to move bags at an airport than it is to move a long-haul truck through a city. So they're going to reach kind of feature parity at different stages in different ways. But yeah, autonomy is happening all around. But it is, again, I keep thinking about like the internet example. If we were having this conference in 1996, we would all agree, because we're in the industry, we would say, well, yeah, the internet exists, but this is still very, very early relative to what the internet becomes.
And we'd all be disappointed because our phones weren't that great.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, exactly. So when people are being disappointed by autonomy, then autonomy is there.
But I think the disappointment part is really interesting because it kind of talks about human nature and human behavior. So I was fortunate enough to have a ride in a Waymo vehicle the other day.
So it's real, it's not completely fake?
It's not, no, there was someone in the car.
Okay.
I don't know if he was somehow...
Tell them...
fake arms down by his side. But what was interesting for me was like how banal, after the initial kind of like excitement, oh my goodness, I'm in an autonomous vehicle, it was very banal. I went to a smoothie shop, got a smoothie, got back in, went back to the Waymo garage. Do you think that a lot of what's going on in sort of like automotive companies at the moment is almost kind of like managing consumer expectation? Because we're so, technology is almost like much more impactful when we don't notice it's there.
Yeah, I don't think the companies care about consumer expectations. I think the companies care about investor expectations.
Okay.
So these projects, especially specifically, Level 4 robotaxis are incredibly expensive.
So that's being driven by investors, not the idea of actually producing.
Yeah, so like, you know, the echo chamber is a company tries to raise money. They tell some investors and press, no, again, no disrespect. Then an article gets written which says the autonomous future is here, and then that was in 2011.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, it's 2022. Why isn't the autonomous future here? So that's a little bit of it. So the companies that have pulled back on those expectations are the same companies who were saying just a few years earlier that autonomy is going to be here sooner. Part of it is a difficult problem.
Yeah.
This is the first time a real artificial intelligent system is going to be mass deployed, and this is not trivially artificial, a trivial AI in the sense of like it helps you with restaurant recommendations, though that at some point in history was interesting. It's not interesting today. You can find those models off the shelf. Autonomy is really a very complicated set of systems. And
just walk us through what challenges do we need to overcome in order to kind of get to that level 5 that you've talked about? Like, so straightforward. We've got, oh my God, we only got 2 minutes left.
Yeah, okay. So
we had 10 minutes left.
The 30-second version of what you have to do, if you're building, and I would implore if you're an engineer in the audience or listening, doing autonomy use cases for off-road development, they're much easier because you don't have to deal with humans. Humans is what makes kind of the human drivers and human pedestrians make the autonomy problem in urban settings difficult. Today, roughly, the Waymo problem or the Cruise problem, companies that have already figured out how to do autonomy. It's no longer a research problem. Now it's an engineering problem, and specifically, it's cost per mile. What Waymo and Cruise are figuring out is an Uber car costs X dollars per mile, and how do we get this system to be cheaper? And that system is both the sensors, the vehicle, the maintenance, and then the, generally speaking, high-definition maps that underpin the entire system. So if you have to go to a new city like New York, you have to build maps, you have to train algorithms for New York City, and then you have physical cars, and you have to operate them and clean them. That all has cost. And so that cost somehow per dollar has to be cheaper than Uber. Yeah. That's what the entire industry is focused on right now. It's no longer, if we were talking 5 years ago, there'd be a huge debate, is autonomy going to happen? Is it safer? Anybody who has any amount of research in the ecosystem no longer asks, is it going to happen and is it going to be safe? Sure. Those are definite and absolute yeses. Now is it going to be cheap enough for everybody to use? The same thing with cell phones. We had satellite phones in the 80s and 90s, but nobody says the mobile revolution happened in 1985. Sure. They say it happened when I could go to the T-Mobile store and I could buy a smartphone with an app store. All right, well, you mentioned 5 years ago, just a final question. Look forward 5 years. Yeah. Where do you think we're going to be? If we get you back to DLD, what will we be talking about then? I think you're seeing much larger deployments. I mean, this year, to give you some sense of San Francisco, 1,500 to 2,000 Ubers run in San Francisco at any given point. Yeah. The deployments that currently exist, there's a very good chance in 12 months there'll be 200 to 400 cars. Yeah. That's a real dent in the number of people that are being moved around. The moment that happens, investors, they're human beings, they sit in those cars, and investors have a very shallow view of most of these industries because they're broadly investing. They sit in those cars in San Francisco, and this narrative that autonomy is 10 years away, and is always 10 years, it goes away. You sit in a car, and you're like, oh, it's here. Yeah. So I should fund the mining company that's doing autonomy, or I should fund the luggage mover, or the street cleaner, or the robot, the pallet mover in the warehouse. Yeah. And so you'll see, I mean, just this year, you've seen an uptick, even though the market is down, you've seen an uptick in autonomy investing. Investors are getting in vehicles and they're saying, okay, this thing actually already exists, and I'm going to try to get ahead of the curve. I'm going to start putting money in. So I think 5 years from now, you see a much, much larger ecosystem, just like if you looked at mobile in 2008 versus 2013. And I think a very good chance that there will be some significant deployments in Munich. I mean, there's already companies working on deployments in Munich. So I think it would be surprising that most people in the audience hadn't had at least some rides, if not regular rides, in an autonomous car.
I can't believe it's over. I've got so much to ask you. Qasar, thank you so much for being here at DLD. We need to get you back because this is a conversation that needs to continue, and it was fascinating to hear your insights. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.